Right, so green manures. For those of us who don't have an awful lot of access to animal manures, because I only have 5 chickens, that's not going to take me very far, and I don't have cows, and I don't have sheep, and I don't have goats, what do? We use green manures instead. It's easy to get seed at farm shops or the co-ops. St. Mary's Co-op has, and I'm doing a plug for them, they have bins and bins and bins and bins and bins of the different green manures that you can use, and you can buy as much as you want or as little as you need. So that's the nice thing about them. If you want to buy 250 grams of buckwheat, that's fine. Or they'll sell you a whole sack of buckwheat if you want a whole sack of buckwheat. Buckwheat is the easiest of the green manures to use. It grows easily, it digs in easily, and it flowers. So it's very good as a beneficial as well. And it grows at this time of year before you need your piece of land to actually plant your summer crops. So get it in now, 5 weeks' time, dig it in, and it's wonderful. Oats and winter rye are easy. They die off in winter. But if you try putting oats in now, if you're not careful, you're going to get volunteer oats growing, and it's going to self-seed, and you're going to have more and more and more oats, which is wonderful, but I don't know very many people who make their own oats porridge or who roll their oats themselves. You can, it's easy enough. Sylvia? Yeah, it's edible. Yeah, you can make buckwheat. You can make buckwheat flour. You can make buckwheat pancakes. You can make buckwheat pillows. There's a lady down in Gagetown who actually makes buckwheat pillows. Yeah, so buckwheat has all sorts of uses. Yeah, has all sorts of uses. Alfalfa, alfalfa has incredibly deep roots. They go up to 20 feet down, if they can get past the rock. But to get alfalfa out, once you've got it, is close on impossible. So that's why I use alfalfa meal rather than growing alfalfa. Red clover is the same family as alfalfa, the same genus as alfalfa. Again, it's very, very good. The little pink clover and the white clover, they're both very good for soil improvement, but they are, again, quite difficult to get rid of once you've got them, because they tend to root out sideways and then come up again, and it's, you know. Red clover I would leave another month, yeah. But again, it's very good for beneficials. It brings in the parasitic wasps, it brings in the hoverflies, and it's nice to have round the edges. There's a new article that came out in Science magazine in England in the last couple of days that my daughter sent me about bees and colony collapse disorder. And they're finding that it could be a £1.8 billion disaster in Britain because of this colony collapse disorder, which they are now attributing principally to certain insecticides that they coat seed with, for a start, and that they spray. And it so discombobulates the poor old bees that they're not feeding their queens. They don't go back to the same hive. They get completely disorientated. They're not looking after their queens, and the whole thing just collapses and they die. But £1.8 billion that it will cost Britain to hand pollinate the plants. So what they were suggesting was doing was literally building great big sort of round each big field. This is on agricultural production. Building round the fields, rebuilding the hedgerows, which they've ripped out mile upon mile of, and also building the flower meadows back, wildflower meadows, so that they can bring all these parasitic wasps back. They can bring back the bees. They can bring back the solitary bees, because we're losing our solitary bees here too. We're losing all our orchard bees. And the orchard bees are desperately important here because they start pollinating long before the honeybees do. So if you've got early flowering cherries or early flowering apples or things like that, we need this blue orchard bee that we have here in New Brunswick and across the Maritimes and across actually into Ontario as well. We actually need those solitary bees desperately, because otherwise we lose half our fruit. So hedgerows, protection, wind protection for one, and also protection so that animals can actually go into the hedgerows to hide away from marauding birds or whatever. Yeah. So, green manures. So that's why to use them. That actually is buckwheat, that picture there. That's what buckwheat looks like when it's in flower. It's easy to grow in situ. It brings your trace elements back up from down below, and it brings the minerals back up from to the surface as well. Normally they're a very good source of nitrogen as well, so if you've got a non-nitrogenous soil, like I have, and it's a source of humus, which is not the same as hummus. We're not eating chickpeas here. Humus is the decomposing material that you get in your soil, which is organic. And it's good for microbes to grow on, especially if I use peas in the fall. I hope to get a crop sometimes, but I didn't last year because obviously the fall was not that good for peas. But I put peas into my ground in the fall, early in the fall, to get the nitrogen-fixing bacteria back into the ground as well, especially after things like corn and squashes, because those are two very, very heavy feeders. So, and it's part of permaculture. Now, doing a little plug for a talk next Tuesday here by Andrew Buckley from Big Sky Permaculture. He's actually from Ontario. Brilliant guy. He's talking about permaculture, which is the whole holistic living, using your own soils, what you grow to grow on, so that you're using the whole sort of ecosystem. And it's well worth listening to him. I had the pleasure of listening to him last year, and unfortunately I can't be here on Tuesday, but please, if you get a chance, book with Edie tonight, because I think space is going to be pretty limited. So your plant tops are used for green compost, and the roots decay into the soil, and therefore you're getting a double whammy, because you're using your greenery in your green and brown compost, and your roots are giving you more food again. Compost, if you've got the space, yes. It's made of vegetation, it's natural, it's a good method of recycling, but it is space intensive, and if you want to speed your compost up, it is labor intensive, because you're going to have to turn it every couple of weeks. And you run the risk of weeds growing in your soil, because if you put only partly decayed compost into your soil, you're going to have possibly some seeds or some weeds that will grow. So be careful in that sense. Your hot compost, now we had a lady talk about composting last year, which I missed as well, but your hot compost has been to 160 degrees, and therefore it has killed pathogens, it's killed seeds, it's killed weeds. But not many of us can actually get to the stage where our compost gets up to 160 degrees, unless you're very clever and it's really being done. And quite often it's not that full of goodness, especially if you're using a really high dry material compost, except for leaf mold on its own. So sometimes you will need to do some extra feeding with fertilizers, although you're using compost as well. It needs time to break down, and you need to find brown and green materials. Brown being the dry materials, green being the wetter materials. So a quick and easy compost, if you don't have masses of space, get a large plastic bag. I use peat moss bags. Get your vegetable peelings, your kitchen scraps, but no meat, no dairy, no bones. Those are really not good, because they bring in all the wrong microbes. You can use sawdust, you can use newspaper, you can use straw, you can use leaves, you can use peat moss, rotted manure, anything that is dry and anything that is wet, anything that is brown, anything that is green. Water you will need, and hopefully a little compost tea as well. And you layer your wet and your dry, and your wet and your dry, and your wet and your dry, and your wet and your dry until the bag is full. Seal it and leave it in a warm spot, or even a hot spot. If you've got a nice hot spot, it will break down quicker. And that's one of the quickest ways of making compost. then you don't have to turn it an awful lot. Sometimes I turn the bags upside down just to give them sort of a bit of extra movement. But I started a couple of bags of compost about 6 weeks ago. They're almost ready now. And that was just sitting in my greenhouse, which isn't a hot greenhouse, it's a cold greenhouse. So there are ways of doing it. That's if you don't have the big space and you don't have masses of pallets that you can make a beautiful series of compost bins with. But there are free pallets available in the city if you want to make proper compost bins. I got some last year from Prospect, big electrical company near Cambridge SIA Insurers. Which pharmacy?
Pharmacy on Prospect Street.
Oh, right. Well, there you are. PharmSave on Prospect. There's one.
See a sign up there that says free pallets.
There we go.
You
So-
gotta get there quick because I see a guy going a truckload at a time.
Some of them are hardwood, and they actually use them and burn them for heat rather than.
Oh, do they?
You can also get them at more monuments by the Sunset Stone Bridge, Sunset Drive, and Royal Road.
Oh, right. Yes. Because, of course, they'd be bringing their heavy granite and whatever. Yeah, so there are ways of getting... And then basically what you do is you put one down flat, you build up 3 sides, and you build your compost on top of that, and you turn it every so often, and then once that one's pretty well full, you move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and that's a good way to do it. And I've been doing heaps until now, but I've...
Do you recommend that you keep the compost far away from your garden?
No.
It could be right up.
Pretty close, yeah. No, mine's...
Small distance.
Yeah, well, seeds and weeds. You're going to get seeds and weeds, regardless. No, my compost heap is within 30 feet of my garden. It's much easier to take the wheelbarrow and just go across. Yeah, and I've got 2 different... I've got one that side, which is pretty well ready now, and I've started another one that side this year with a lot of sod that I took off. So, yeah, and sod is wonderful. Turn it over upside down, put it at the bottom. That's your base layer, because that will give you some soil and that will give your microbes start work, because you need microbes either from some previous compost or from soil to actually start the breakdown process. And if you're doing a big heap, it's best to do it 1 meter high, 1 meter wide, and 1 meter depth-wise, because the bigger the heap, the quicker it heats up. And try and put some sort of pipe or a big tube down the center of it to get some aeration, because it needs aeration to help the breakdown as well.